If you've been intrigued by what you've been seeing on this channel and are considering moving to Saipan, if you'd like a sunnier, simpler, slower lifestyle while still being part of the US, then start with the Saipan Living Relocation Guide, an A to Z reference of everything you'll need to adjust to life here on Saipan, Tinian, or Rota. Order here on YouTube, on Amazon, or at saipanliving.com. Then consider a phone or Zoom consultation where you can ask any question at all to plan your move to Saipan. Then when you're ready to take the leap, you can sign up for a reconnaissance tour before you move, or a relocation tour. Visit different neighborhoods, see what life is like, get your paperwork in order, your PO box, your ID, so you can hit the ground running. As a bonus, if you sign up for any tour or consultation, you'll get a copy of the Fast Track Kit that has all the forms and documents and applications you need to start your residency. My name is Walt Goodridge. Let's make your move to Saipan simple, fast, and stress-free. Okay, welcome to the live stream. I have some good news and bad news. The good news is the stream is partially working. The bad news is I cannot see your comments during the live stream. For some reason, as sometimes happens with technical stuff, glitches just appear out of nowhere and derail the best laid plans of mice and men. So I cannot see your comments, but I do have a few things that I'm scheduled to talk about. So we'll hope that this clears up at some point. If not, then you could send your questions to Walt at Discover Saipan, and I'll check it occasionally. But the show must go on. Okay, so first thing is, my name is Walt Goodridge. I'm coming to you live from Saipan and in the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. And my job is to answer questions that you may have about relocating, questions you may have about life and culture here to the best of my ability. And anything that I can't answer, I will research and provide an answer at a later date. So again, I'm not able to see your comments, but if you email me at Walt at Discover Saipan, I will check my email during the stream and we'll get going. So first of all, this works better if you do ask questions. So we'll see how that works out today. Let's see. So I'll start with some questions that were asked during the week, and we will do our best to answer them now. So the first question was about Medicare and Medicaid. Someone asked, bear with me here, I'm going to see if I can open up a different screen to see the questions that might be coming through. Okay, so someone asked a question about all right, so I am able to see the questions. All right, and the question is, I'm an American looking to relocate to Saipan in a few years. Will the hospital on Saipan take Medicaid? Yes, absolutely will. However, there are certain differences in how Medicare and Medicaid are administered here on Saipan as compared to the mainland US 50 states and the District of Columbia. So what I will do is I will post some things exclusively for members, since that's a question that's for relocation insiders. I'll share that within 10 minutes of the end of the live stream, so you'll be able to get that answer. But yes, Medicare eligibility, I'll just share a few of the items from this chart here. It compares the 50 states to the CNMI, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. In terms of your eligibility, yes, the same eligibility rules apply. In terms of how it's administered, yes, it's federally administered. some of the major differences is whereas you have a wide network of participating providers stateside, you would have fewer local providers here on Saipan, and some people have to travel to Guam and Hawaii or the mainland to avail themselves of that service. The I'm not familiar with Medicare and Medicaid in terms of the different parts, but apparently here Part A, B, and D are available, and Medicare Advantage plans are limited or unavailable locally. So again, I'll place a chart in the uh, comment in the community post section, but it will only be available to relocation insider members to see. So Dale Volk, thanks for that question, and you'll get your answer shortly. Okay, next. Later on in this live stream, I'm going to share what I promised. I'm going to share with you 7 rookie mistakes that new residents make when they move to Saipan, and you might find this interesting. So stick around till the end, and I'll share that with you in the last 15 minutes. All right. So next question. NDD Bulldog 1 appears to be someone who has recently relocated to Saipan, and he posted this comment. I didn't know what to expect more than what I have watched and researched. So he was willing to jump out on faith and move to Saipan without knowing without being fully appraised of what the lay of the land is here. I'm slowly learning where to spend and not spend money. I'm trying to log for myself where to buy this or that. The pricing for the same or similar items are all over the place. If you are moving here, and this is his advice for others, if you're moving here, look at the gift shop, Warehouse 6, and I'm not familiar with those stores, and the Isle of Saipan on Middle Road. Yes, so I did the same thing. In my quest to spend as little money as possible, I made a chart of how much certain items that I buy regularly cost on Saipan. So I have a list of certain stores that I frequent for specific items, even if it's to save 10 cents, 20 cents on a package of sponges. So I will share that with you. In terms of your hardware purchases, one of the things you may want to do, and I'm a bit reluctant to do it publicly because I don't want to take business away from some of the major stores. But there are a few hardware stores on Saipan. You may want to check Guangdong Hardware for some items that may be a little cheaper than some of the larger hardware stores. So that's one for hardware. And also, it's a bit counterintuitive, but as you mentioned, the I Love Saipan store on Middle Road actually has housewares, whereas the Isle of Saipan and Garapan in the tourist district is geared more towards the tourist. The one on Middle Road is geared more towards and stocked with inventory more relevant to people who actually live here. So there's an entire second floor that has housewares, that has school supplies, and on the main floor, again, you'll have a lot of housewares and supplies and even food that you can get there, and those prices are very competitive. And again, I'll put a post in the comment section that has some of the items. Another place you may want to try is National Office Supply, where you may think it's an office supply store, but again, many of the stores here are multi-purpose in the sense that they have to cater to a wider audience in order to stay in business. So you can find housewares at National Office Supply as well. So, yep, thanks for your input in terms of helping other people navigate the pricing here on Saipan. In general, though, I find the pricing to be fairly constant because it's such a small island, because the store owners know that the public does have options. You'll generally find the prices, in my experience, in terms of what I buy, to be essentially about the same. The variation is not that great. If your experience is different, please let me know what you found to vary widely. But let's see. So thanks for that. Okay, let's. Julian F3K said he's looking forward to seeing the island, I imagine, and he's still waiting for the video. I'm still waiting for the video where you are filming about people who are full of themselves and try to infect Saipan. All right, I'm not sure if I had promised that, but apparently I did. So that brings up an interesting point, and I will get into this later on when I talk about the mistakes that newcomers make to the island. So that's an interesting topic. Let me know. Someone leave a comment and let me know if that's working. Let me check it out here. Leave a comment. All right, seems to be working on my end, so I am able to see the comments in my alternate screen. So let's get back here. So the people who moved to Saipan and tried to infect Saipan. Okay. From in my experience, for the most part, the people who end up relocating to Saipan tend to be of a calm, well-traveled, tolerant lot who have an expansive worldview. That's my interaction. And again, that could be limited by the vibe that I give off and the sort of people who I attract and the sort of people who are attracted to me. But the people who I tend to meet tend to be people who are not full of themselves to any um, publicly shameful degree. There are a few exceptions. There have been a few exceptions over the years, but for the most part, again, as I've mentioned in previous live streams, the people here tend to be people who've traveled a lot, people who are in the military, people who are um, public servants, people who are doctors and teachers who've taught over the world. So, for the most part, people tend not to be full of themselves to that degree. And to survive here on Saipan, you have to be accepting of the multicultural influence that exists here on the island. So, again, so for the most part, we haven't encountered that. However, what I have found, and again, my experience is from living in New York most of my life. So that's on the other end of the spectrum in terms of human interaction. But I find that in the States, people tend to have a particular worldview that tends to be a bit cynical. In New York, for example, what I noticed that's a little different from here is that people tend to bond on their shared misery in New York. Let's say you're standing at a post office or in a supermarket line and only two or three cashiers are open. Now, people tend to bond over the fact and turn to the person next to them and say, I can't believe that there are only two cashiers open. They may start to complain. So there's a worldview that says things are bad. I must complain and I will. And since misery loves company, I will pull everyone else in with me. And I've noticed it. People tend to bond. Even here on Saipan, sometimes the mainlanders will tend to initiate conversation and bond on that, on commiserating on that shared misery. But that's not a universal worldview. So people who come from the mainland with that worldview tend, I think, to modify that after a while because they don't get the support from they may get it from other mainlanders, but not from the local community. So um, the average mainlander may come here with a mentality that says things are bad, and I must complain and and find fault. Whereas the average Pacific Islander, the average who I've met, the average Asian, Filipino, Korean, Chinese is not of that same mindset. So that's a difference in opinion. So when you have someone who is of that mindset, feeling that they are victimized, feeling that they have to rebel, feeling that the world is against them, then they tend to stand out. And I've seen one or two cases where that happens. I'll give you a little example. Again, I don't do a lot of socializing, so my interaction with that element of of the society may be limited. But I remember during COVID, there was a fellow. The all the stores had a rule that you had to wear a mask upon entering, and whether you agreed with the mandate or not, those were the rules to go through life without issues. You follow the rules, and whether you agree or not, it's only going to be for a few minutes while you shop. At least that's my view. This fellow, however, wanted to assert his right and his autonomy and didn't want to wear the mask. But the store cashier and manager insisted, so he went out and he got a an old World War II gas mask. And if you've ever seen those, they have the eye, they have the tube coming out, and he wore that to make a dramatic statement that he was not in agreement with the mask mandate. Um, and everyone in the store looked at him oddly, and he took care of his business and he left. So I've seen cases where people, this was a mainlander, obviously, have bring some of their worldviews and mindset to life here, and it doesn't go over too well. Meaning, no one's going to ostracize him to any great degree, but people will still be nice and friendly. But there will be a little bit of pushback, especially if he's blatantly breaking the rules like that. But someone like that would not be happy anywhere, I imagine. And someone like that may not be happy here, but it's not through any fault of the community, in my opinion. That's because he's not willing to just go with the flow. All right, so that's an example, in my opinion. There are people here who may rail against the politics here on the island because it's a small island. There does tend to be obvious favoritism, a little bit of nepotism, and there are people who come from the mainland who will rail against that and maybe stand out writing articles in the newspapers, for example. But again, for the most part, I think people are generally easygoing, will understand what's happening in the community and not make a public nuisance of themselves. But there have been a few exceptions. My advice to you is don't be one of them. All right. As one of my favorite YouTubers, Lionel Nation says, you choose the hill you want to die on, choose the battle, that's worth fighting for. What during the COVID times, again, I say whether you agree with the mask, the efficacy of the mask wearing or not, the society says this is what we would like from our community. You go along with it. There's no reason to fight, in my opinion, to fight this for the 5 minutes that you're going to be in a store. It just doesn't make any practical sense to me. So again, that's my opinion. Um, let's see if there's more here. So I think individuals, and now the thing about people like that is it's sort of like the Dunning-Kruger effect. They don't know what they don't know. People like that are not aware that they're behaving in a way that's counter to the mindset and the norms of the local community. Or if they do, they don't care. So the thing about that is half the time people who are vibrating at a different level are going to spin off through centrifugal force and end up moving somewhere else where they feel more comfortable. Or if they just like conflict, they'll stay and continue to rail against the system here. But again, in my opinion, from my experience, for the most part, people tend to be more easygoing. And because the powers that be are of a Pacific Island mentality, then it they don't end up infecting the island. That's my experience. If you disagree, let me know. Okay. Uh, Julian F3K also says, I can't wait to introduce myself to your local community watch group as I'm planning a trip. All right. I don't think there's a community watch group here, none that I've been made aware of. The community itself is somewhat self-policing, if you will, because and if you've lived in small Midwestern towns in the mainland, then you might be familiar with this. I've had some experiences. Um, I've had some experiences, eh, conversations with my tour clients who liken their time here on Saipan to growing up in the Midwest in small towns. So I've always said this is a small town in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So the sort of human interaction, societal norms, expectations, conformity that you would find in a small town exists here as well. People tend to behave themselves a lot different. And some of that is, I believe, due to the nature of the type of person who ends up here. You don't end up here by accident. So the sort of person who is willing to travel 8,000 miles from the mainland to come here is of a different mindset. And again, I find them a little more agreeable. But the community itself, by virtue of it being this small, tends to police itself. In New York, in contrast, you get mad at a cashier, you can throw profanity at her, and you never have to deal with her again because you can go to another CVS, you can go to another Walmart. But here on Saipan, you're going to run into the same people over and over again, and that underlying awareness, I think, is contributes to people um, acting properly, behaving a little more respectfully, little more mannerly, a little more courteously. That's my experience. That's what. Um, so that's one of the reasons I think, just because you won't be rude to people because that might be the governor's niece or wife. Um, so people tend to behave a little more decently. Another thing that I found, and I alluded to this when I talked about the bureaucracy in the last live stream, is that uh, things tend to be easier here to get done. I talked about the going to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles to get my car registered and that sort of thing. And I thought of something else that happened to me and contrasted that with how it is in the States. When I go to a government office in the States, whether it's the courts dealing with the courts or the Department of Motor Vehicle, the apparent prevailing mindset is by the person behind the counter is, I really don't want to be here. What's the issue you're bothering me with? Let's get you out of here as quickly as possible. And sometimes getting you out of here as quickly as possible means that I'll just send you off on your way, whether I can help you or not. And I say that because I remember once I had to deal with the court system, and I filled out a form. It had to do with someone passing away and me filling out an administrative form for their estate. And I remember handing it in, and the person behind the counter looked at it and said, "This is wrong," and just handed it back to me. Wouldn't say what was wrong, wouldn't say which line I needed to correct. And it was quite frustrating, so much so that I had to go over that person's head, go to the head office, make a complaint, and the manager, Anne Rice, I think was her name, was nice enough to come down. And this was many years ago, but I remember her name was nice enough to come down and gently chastise the worker and get the forms completed and processed the same day because I was leaving New York and coming back to Saipan. So anyway, the mindset of the people who I encounter, whether it's at the post office or whether it's at the Motor Vehicle Bureau or the court system in the States, tends to be one where you feel like you're intruding on them and that they're doing you a favor by waiting on you. Whereas here on Saipan, I found it to be the exact opposite. I remember years ago, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble for admitting to this, but years ago, during the garment factory era, I had to, my girlfriend at the time um, had 90 days or so to get a new job, or else by the terms of the CW contract, she would have to leave the island. So I hired her as my housekeeper. And I remember going to the uh, labor department in San Antonio and telling them what I wanted to do. And I remember distinctly there were three or four people who got together and all sort of discussed how they could make this happen, because apparently, for whatever technicality, it wasn't an easy thing to do. I guess based on her status, based on my status, I'm not sure exactly what, but they had to bring other people involved to figure out how they could actually get this done so that they could help me achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I remember discussing it and was told that years ago there was a fellow who worked for labor. I think it was during John Joyner's tenure there. And part of the training was actually to train people how to help people as opposed to just simply saying no, sorry, that's we can't do that, or sorry, that's against rules, and just writing people off. So people, part of the training was actually how we make this happen, and I got that distinct feeling that that was what was going on. Their job was to say, okay, there's a customer here. How can we help you today? And there's actually meaning behind that statement. How can we help you today? So they went out of their way to make it happen, and I was able to get the employment. So that's one of the things I noticed. Whether that's just a function of how that particular office operated, or whether it's part of the Pacific way, there is more of a helpful, friendly disposition that the people have in general. And I found that at various offices I've gone to when I'm helping a tour client, for example, locate in a 1944 photograph, locate a site on Saipan to match where the photograph was taken in 1944. I'll stop in at the college. I'll stop at historic preservation office, and people will go out of their way to, even people who are not directly associated with uh, that particular endpoint, will go out of their way to add what they know, to call someone who might be more knowledgeable. So there's generally this underlying tone of helpfulness that I have found. That's my experience. I'm sure that there are people who might encounter just the opposite. And again, as I've said in previous live streams, that could be a function of the energy that they bring to to life. Uh, okay, so some questions are coming in. Let's see. Respect, Mr. Holloman. Mr. Holaman said, respect the elders and OGs. Absolutely. That is something that's prevalent in Pacific Island culture, is respect for the elders, whereas in Western culture, you might find people, once they pass a certain age, they get relegated to old folks' homes, and the respect from the younger generation and from within the community drops. But here on Saipan, elders are respected. I've told a story before about it's basically forbidden to challenge, chastise, correct an elder, even if you know that they're wrong. So that's something that's part of the culture as well. Okay. When you take a client, Robert Foster asks, when you take a client on a World War II military tour of Saipan and Tinian, how many days do you recommend for that? Thanks for that question. That gives me the opportunity to do a little plug. I do a 2-day tour of the island. So if you go to discoversaipan.com and check out the different tours, you'll see a combined Saipan and Tinian World War II pilgrimage slash Tinian to Hiroshima tour that I offer. That's over 2 days. First day, we start at 9 o'clock, pick you up at the airport, circle the entire island, stop at the different uh, sites, whether they're cultural, it'll be primarily World War II in this case. So you'll see pillboxes, you'll see bunkers, you'll see tanks, you'll see blockhouses, you'll see all sites along the way, the landing beaches, the relics, and you'll see Suicide Cliff, you'll see the last command post, so you'll see a whole at least 30 or 40 different sites on the entire tour, and that's an all-day tour until maybe about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we meet again the next morning and head to Tinian early, usually on the first flight out to Tinian, and we circle that island as well and go to the bomb pits and the runways and the uh, bomb assembly area and the northern tip and the southern tip of the island. And that finishes up by about 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and then we head back to Saipan. So you're able to salvage the rest of the day if you have other things to do. So typically it's a 2 day tour. Um, there are people who may also include diving or snorkeling, so people may extend and stay 3 days. But if you wanted to do some other activities, I would say 4 days tops would be good to spend. But my tours usually I'll be able to complete those in 2 consecutive days. Hope that answers your question. Okay, thanks for that. I'll get to, let's see, where are we now? 9:32. All right. Okay. Um, all right. Next question is, I'm thinking of retiring to Saipan. I don't drive a car. I drive mopeds. Do people drive mopeds on Saipan? Yes. Eric Johnson, they do. People do drive mopeds, not as much as during the garment factory days, but there are a few people who ride mopeds. I will just say this, as I've mentioned in other live streams, because you don't drive, obviously, then uh, this may not be an option for you. But one of the things that I've found is that it is easier in the long run to have access to a vehicle. If you, as we talked about earlier, if you want to shop at different locations, the moped might be a little impractical. Sometimes if it's rainy season, then having a car provide a little bit of shelter may be a little more convenient. But of course, all of these are manageable. You just go out when it's not raining and stock up during the rainy season. But for the most part, I have found that having a car or access to one is very helpful to navigating the island, since there are certain parts of the island that are inaccessible by moped. Just something to keep in mind, but there are taxi services, cheap taxi services you can use if you need to do some large shopping. And or you could learn to drive before you get here and make that uh, part of your plan. All right. All right. So let's start with what I have promised. Okay. Um, 7 rookie mistakes that people make. I actually only have 6 here, so we'll see if something else comes up while I'm doing this. Okay, the first mistake that I think people make when they relocate here is that they assume that this is just like the United States. Now, technically, it is part of the United States. It's a Commonwealth of the United States. Technically, it is. On paper, it is. Legally, it is. Through covenant agreements, there is a political union with the United States. But people make the mistake of assuming that the worldview, the mindset, the freedoms, if you will, that exist stateside also exist here. And when I say freedoms in quotes like that, I mean the freedom to do anything you want, regardless of consequences, and hide behind what you believe the First Amendment entitles you to. So, what do I mean by that? As we discussed earlier, there are certain people who believe that they can act a certain way, violate certain community norms, simply because in America there is this underlying belief that anything goes, we have complete freedom, we can do anything we want, and as long as we're not breaking the law, there are no harsh consequences. And even if we are breaking the law, in certain cases, the consequences are minimal. And that mentality, in my opinion, does not fit well here because not that the community is restrictive, but I think it is more conservative in the sense that people act respectfully and consider the larger community in how they behave to a greater degree than the people stateside, who, because of the size of the population, are not uh, encouraged to consider others and or consequences. Okay, so I mentioned before, once I was driving through Chalankanoa, Sisupi here, and I guess I reverted to my lead foot tendencies as developed in New York, learning to drive in New York, and I zoomed past a house, and someone screamed out from their patio, "Slow down!" Um, so whereas in the States, that typically wouldn't happen. People are free to drive however they want as long as they don't mow anybody down. But again, there's a bond within the community here where people tend to notice things like that and uh, respond accordingly if you're violating some community norms. Um, so one of the mistakes that people make is believing that this is the United States to the degree that is and permissible stateside. And maybe there's too much of a politician in me. If I need to be more direct saying that, I'll give some more examples. All right, another mistake um, people make, and many of these can be subsumed under the heading of not being able to read the room. One of these skills that I think you develop when you travel more, when you've seen more of the world, is that you have the ability to read the room. And by read the room, if you're not familiar, I simply mean entering a situation, whether it's a room, an actual room, or whether it's a society or a culture or a situation, and being able to assess what is going on, being able to assess the energy in the room, being able to assess the norms without automatically simply assuming that uh, you are the main character in in every room that you enter. All right, so people then tend to act in ways that are not consistent with the local environment. Okay, let me give you an example. One of the things, so now reading the room counts as one. The next is using your outside voice inside. This is one of the uh, inability to read the rooms that I've encountered. When I do my tours, on on several occasions, I've had clients who, when we walk into a store or when we go to the commuter airline to fly to Tinian, the volume that they're speaking will automatically turn heads and everyone will be looking and participating in our conversation. Now, being a private person myself, that's something that makes me a little uneasy. So on several occasions, I've said to my clients, please use your inside voice. Typically, a lot of Americans tend to speak naturally at a much higher volume than people here tend to speak, or people in Asia tend to speak. And it's something that's noticeable after living here a long time. whether that's just the American way. I remember going to the post office, and the post office is crowded, and everyone is engaged in their conversations. People, these guards are talking, the agents, customs agents are talking, clients are dealing with the agents, the tellers, and it's a general a din, where you can't really identify specific conversations. It's just a din of a murmur, white background noise of conversation. However, there is one conversation that is head and shoulders above the rest, both figuratively and literally. A tall fellow, a mainlander, who's speaking, and his the volume of his conversation is drowning out everyone else's in the post office, and you can't uh, not hear what's going on. And that, again, is something that's I found unique to the mainlanders, to the Americans who come here. Their volume is just tends to be much higher, and they tend therefore to attract attention to themselves. So again, it's just this is a lot. Some of these are just my personal preferences, the things that stick out to me because I'm more of a private person. But that's something that I've noticed as well. Not reading the room. So we have believing you're in America, not reading the room, using your outside voice. So let's see what else we got here. Um, this one is something I learned the hard way and still to this day get wrong, and that is keep in mind that this is a small island in the middle of the Pacific, and all of the items that are in the stores have come by container ship. So for me in particular, when I ask the stores to stock Laura bars and kettle chips and terra chips and Cliff bars, they will do so because they've gotten a little bit more popular. The items have gotten more popular, so I'm not the only one purchasing them. But when they run out, it'll be another 2 months before they get restocked. They'll have to wait for their usual ordering time, place the order. The order comes from California, and it takes a while for the schedules to align, so that it could take a month or two for the items to get here. So sometimes when a new item arrives, I know that I should buy a few. I know that I should stock up in certain items because once it sells out, you're not going to find it anywhere. And there are some items that you can only get in certain stores. So if Joe 10 supermarket runs out of Lara bars, I cannot get them anywhere else because no other store carries them. This is not an item that the average person here on Saipan is purchasing. So once Joe 10 runs out of it, that's it until they restock. So one of the things that people joke about sometimes is that when you see an item, you buy as many as you can afford and stock up, especially if it's a specialty item that is not typically stocked. And sometimes what will happen is I'll see an item, buy one or two, leave the store, drive a mile down the road, and then say, you know what, I should really pick up more. I'll drive back, and they're already gone. So that happens sometimes. So another mistake that rookies make is believing that the supply is endless, and sometimes it is not. All right. Another mistake that I made coming here is believing that I'm anonymous. Landing here in New York, here on Saipan many years ago, I believed that, similar to when I lived in New York, that I could just go about my business, do what I want to do, date who I want to date, and I would just disappear into the crowd. And that doesn't happen because, particularly as a new arrival, people notice you when you start appearing in the supermarket. People know that they haven't seen you before. They know that you're new. So people tend to notice. Some may get curious and ask if you're from the ship. They may ask, "Are you new here on the island?" So people tend to pay attention, and you're not as anonymous as you might believe. Similarly, I'll tell you a story. I went to a hardware store here to buy a wall mirror, square mirror that I was going to put up a few on the wall. Anyway, I asked the floor attendant if he had these mirrors, and he said no. They had sold out. I had seen them there before, but they had sold out. We were in earshot of a cashier who then said, "Oh, excuse me, sir, those mirrors you're asking about, I know I have some. I bought some a couple and I'm not using them." So I said, "Great. Would you be willing to sell them?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, great. Where can we meet so I can buy them from you?" And she said, "Oh, don't worry. I know where you live." So keep in mind, this is a person who I've never met before, don't know who she is, but I was not anonymous. She knew where I lived. And sure enough, when the time came, when the appointed time came, I saw her walking down the street. Apparently, she lived in the neighborhood, and we made the exchange, and I got my mirrors. So that's just one example of you not being anonymous here on the island. All right. And people may know more about you than you think they do, because once you talk to one person, then invariably that person will talk to somebody else. And then you may find yourself in a situation where someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, are you the guy from Minneapolis? Or are you the guy from New York who has a Toyota Corolla?" So people may know more about you than you think. It's not necessarily a bad thing. People will also look out for you. They'll recognize if your car is being driven by someone else. They may recognize if someone is coming in and out of your apartment with your stereo set. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to get used to if you are not used to it or if you're a hermit. All right, and let's see. I think that I'm up to number 6 now, and this one is just for the men. One of the attractions of this part of the world for men living in the States, and by the way, 90% of my listening audience and viewing audience are men, so this is more for you guys. Many of the guys here, as you know, this part of the world have come here in search of romance, whether they're going to Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, wherever, in search of love. And what happens is, and this happens here, it happens in Thailand and Philippines, is they end up falling in love with and marrying the first person who shows them any sort of affection and attention. And I, it could be that they found their soulmate. Uh, the chances, in my opinion, the probability of that being the case are very, very small. What I think happens instead is that they are so used to the lack of that, whatever it is that they are is attractive to them, whether it's the femininity, whether it's the easygoing nature, whether it's the submissiveness that whatever it is, the brighter disposition, the ease of male female interaction, they end up being smitten very early on and end up selling the ranch and committing and marrying the first person who shows them some attention. Now, that's your prerogative to do that, of course, but I would suggest that that might be a mistake because the ones who might be the women, again, this is for the guys, the women who might be the most forward with making themselves available to you, noticing you, and stalking you are probably the ones who are the most desperate and the ones who might have an ulterior motive. And this is something for your benefit, whether you're in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, China, Philippines, wherever. So be very careful of committing to anyone too soon. If this is in fact your soulmate, then there's no rush for you to have to bequeath half your stuff to this person within 6 months of meeting them. So, all right. So this is just my advice. One of the mistakes that newbies make, new men make, is that they commit too early and not realize that they have more options than they did stateside. Um, a fellow remember, you are the exotic foreigner. You are the prize. You are the person who is sought after. So there's no reason for you to commit um, everything so quickly upon arrival. All right. So for those of you who want to attack me on that one, feel free to go ahead. Okay. Um, so we're wrapping up. Can't think of a seventh. Well, those were six items, six rookie relocation mistakes. Let me see if I can think of another one for you. We've got believing you're in America still. So let me just say something about that. So again, yes, you are in America. We're on the U.S. postal system. We're on the U.S. dollar. Someone else asked about that as well. But culturally, so legally you are, but your happiness within the culture is not going to be defined by the legality of this being America. It's going to be defined by the culture that is prevalent. And you have local Pacific Island culture, you have Chamorro, Carolinian, you have Filipino influence, you have a very Catholic community, you have small number of mainlanders. You have Bangladeshis, you have Chinese, you have Thailanders, you have people from Korea and Japan. So you have a wide range of cultures that are mixed in that create an environment that is unique and not uh, American in the sense that it is stateside. So I think that's something to be aware of and not make that mistake. So my best advice would simply be to observe the lay of the land before you. Um, there's no harm in you just being an observer for a while before you start to flex your personality on the wider community. All right. Let's see. Thanks for your participation, everyone. Let's see, make sure I don't miss any questions here. Um, let's see, let me just make sure this is working. All right. Okay, seems to be working. So with that said, um, those were the the six rookie mistakes that people make. And with that, let me just say a few administrative things before we wrap up. If you're watching this after the live stream, please feel free to leave a question in the comments or leave a question in the comments of any video on the channel, and I will compile them and answer them in next week's live stream if there's one. And you may want to check out the Saipan Living Relocation Guide that's available at saipanliving.com and also at waltgoodridge.com, and I am updating it as we speak. So if you buy the current version, which is the 2022 version, I will be uploading the 2026 version before the end of the month. And anyone who has purchased the current version will get the updated version when it is released at no additional charge. So feel free to order now, and then you'll get the updated version once it's released. Okay. Now there is a hype button that YouTube has instituted um, beneath this. I think the live streams as well as regular long form videos where you can hype this content, meaning for you at no charge, you can click the hype button and that will encourage YouTube to promote the video to other subscribers, other viewers on YouTube. So if you do see the hype button, please do click that. And with that said, I will thank you guys for participating. All right, someone left a few comments, so we'll just spend a little time on that. Mark Lundegren said to the lady, gave some advice to the ladies, watch out for the gigolos. Well, I guess I wouldn't have met any gigolos. because I'm not their market, but I guess there must be, but it's I know in fact I know a fellow who was actually a gigolo, not here on Saipan, but actually in New Zealand. And he told me stories. So they do exist, but I haven't been aware of any here on Saipan. Um, all right. So thanks again for participating. So, our market here is very limited, I think, for gigolos, but you're welcome, Mark, if that's your um, underhanded or understated advertisement for your own services, feel free to start a new your own business here. I think that might be illegal though. But anyway, thanks again for participating, everyone. I will figure out what was wrong. It didn't seem to be a major hindrance this time, but my software seems to be acting up. I'm not able to see the questions on the regular screen, but things went fairly well. Thanks for participating. If you have any other questions, again, email me at walt@discoversaipan. Let me just check here if any were sent there. Okay, nothing this time. All right, great. So thanks again for participating. This is Walt Goodridge, the Jamaican on Saipan. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next live stream. Please watch as many videos as you can. We're getting close to getting the channel monetized, and once that happens, I will actually be doing workshops here on Saipan to show others how to start their own YouTube channel and how to grow it. Um, we are need a few more members to subscribe. I will be doing a few more member videos and posts. So hopefully becoming a member, whether it's at the Pacific Pioneer, the Relocation Insider, or the General Supporter, please feel free to join. That'll be very helpful as well. And I will see you in the next live stream.